would really like to just give a sense of how these talks are going to be conducted over the next few days. Daniela decided would try a different format, because over the last few years we've had panels with up to 5 to 7 people, each speaking, making laptop presentations, showing their work or their expertise, and then there was a moderator in a very traditional way. And we've tried to break this down because it's using the formula that only the audience in the room are also all the speakers, except for a few handful of friends and guests. Essentially, this is a closed session, so we want people to feel very comfortable and free to speak their minds. And we encourage conversation, we encourage questions and dialogue. But I would ask everybody, even if something falls way out of their comfort zone, if they would not interrupt any of the keynote speakers, because it is intended to have a question and answers later. So if anybody has something they want to bring up, please do. Don't, because it can really throw people off. And it doesn't matter how important or valuable that question may feel. At that moment, I would really ask everybody just to have respect for the speaker, because we're all of us always nervous sitting up here. So it can actually throw people off somewhat more than others. There was one other thing I wanted to say about, yes, moderators. There are 4 moderators, and we are loosely in the crowd. We're not going to sit up with the speakers. And those are Bruce Ferguson, Professor of American University in Cairo, Tony Myatt, Professor of now the University of Sussex, and myself and Daniela. So we are, in fact, 4 loose moderators who sort of can maybe grab a microphone and bring a conversation back on track if we feel that's worthwhile. And we have a timing issue sometimes as well, because we have to try and stick to the schedule. So those are the 4 people that can interject. I'm sorry, I hate creating rules and regulations, but I think just to give everybody a bit of space to continue their train of thought. So that's about it. So Daniela and I wanted to start today because we challenged everybody to give us a thought for the next 10 years of TBA 21, because we're not very retrospectively minded foundation. So we're not really indulging in all our great achievements, which I feel are many, of the past 10 years. But rather to sort of give ourselves a thought about where we're going to go for the future, and not only ourselves, particularly the fact that we have essentially created an institution against our will in many ways, because it wasn't really intended to be an institution when we started off. And I just maybe want to go back to how we did get going. I got going in 2002, because I'd been trying for over a year to buy a work from an artist called Janet Cardiff called To Touch. And after chasing her respective galleries in New York and Berlin, and finally herself and her partner George Bers-Millers, I understood that unless I was an institution or a museum, I would not be allowed to acquire work, because they produce so few works and they want them in the public domain, and private collectors have a nasty habit of hoarding wonderful works of art in storerooms. And that sort of, I ran home, created TBA 21 in a haste with a lawyer, and created a non-profit foundation, and went flying back to Berlin 3 weeks later and told her I had a foundation and I had an office and I had an exhibition space, and I wanted her to be the first show. She sold me To Touch. So finally, that's how actually I got started, and it made me understand right from the beginning, and the important message here was from the artist teaching me what my responsibility was going to be over the next decades, because it was not about indulging my sense of acquisition. And don't forget, I come from a family of generations of collectors, and I sit on the board of the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum trying to maintain my father's and my grandfather's legacy, and I know what an imposition and what a responsibility it is, not only to look after works of art from their conservation point of view, but also to give them meaning and purpose through curatorial work in the future. So when I met Daniela 8 years ago, I'd sort of been extremely indulgent collector for a few years, and I bought some really great pieces. I bought a lot of rubbish as well. And I think Daniela and I have then let TBA grow, and we've been nurturing it, and it's really been a tremendous partnership. So TBA 21 to me now is us. So that's why we're both sitting here today. Because we couldn't be more different as two different individuals. We couldn't have, but we've never really had a dreadful fight about anything. And our relationship...
Other than very small things.
Yeah, no, lots and lots and lots of little things. Many, 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 many. But it's always been about approach, and I think that we've found a way of making these opposites very complementary. This, in a way, has also become the trademark, if you want, of TBA 21, because beyond collecting, essentially, I would say, media art and a lot of video and sound art as well, that has been the focus of the 21st century as we understand it, and I think the collection has some very important positions from this era, from this period. But I think that we're going to take you over to see Olafur Eliasson's pavilion that we commissioned with David AJ, where I remember sitting in on so many conversations with artists complaining about the architecture that they had to install their works in, and this discomfort, which is historical, between art and architecture. So to sort of create a symbiosis of these two things coming together in the most perfect way, I think it was a great achievement, and the pavilion of your Black Horizon is a great example of that really working, and I'm really looking forward to showing that to you. But moving on from that, I wanted to add another component which became sound, which is something I knew nothing about, and I do love embracing things I don't know anything about as an opportunity to learn. And the Morning Line, which is now in Vienna, has been in Istanbul, in Seville, is the next project which I embarked on. And the foundation commission took 4 years to develop. We perfected an incredible ambisonic sound system with a number of chambers and spaces through which the actual sculpture became an instrument for composition to sort of move this electronic work, music out, and sound works out of the sort of grungy basements of universities and concert halls and underneath train stations onto the above ground status. And we've been commissioning now over 30 works of music. Then there came another layer of political and social change, which came from my sense of activism and also Daniela's profound sense of justice and social sense of values that she has. And both of us, coming from very different backgrounds, we shared a very common thread in terms of the works we wanted to commission. Amar, who spoke yesterday, is a prime example of this type of work. We worked with Kudlu Gatterman on a piece called Kuba, and it wasn't just commissioning this piece together with Carnegie and the Wiener Festwochen, it was also to do with how it was then curated and travelled up from Romania all the way up the Danube River to Vienna. Making a statement all on its way with a number of other artists' contributions about identity and identities of minorities and minority questions. And all of this during the Austrian presidency of the EU and the accession of new member states from the East European bloc. So again, we had exhibitions called Shooting Back. We've ventured into this area. We did an incredible exhibition called Question of Evidence, where we brought together Tibetan, Burmese, Indian and Chinese artists who were looking at the questions of Burma and Tibet and their different approaches with Aung San Suu Kyi and the Dalai Lama, something that's very close to my heart. And Amar, we commissioned a piece that I mentioned and alluded to yesterday called Torn First Pages, which is a statement about all the political manifestos on the front page of every publication, including the yellow pages in Burma, which states very clearly what the political dogma of this military junta that has been ruling Burma for many years. Whilst this exhibition, this piece was in an important exhibition of Indian art in the Guggenheim last summer, you know, it was a very tremendous sense of achievement that there was a voice out there that belonged to the art world that celebrated the reincarnation, if you want, of Aung San Suu Kyi into the political landscape of Burma. So very, very socially and politically informed exhibitions that then transported our shared value system, if you want, and that shared also with the artists that we worked with. But again, I want to talk a little bit about why we are here as well and sharing these ideas, and why your contributions are so important to us, because this monastery I've been responsible for nearly 20 years. I've been restoring it for 10, and I know it doesn't look like it, but it had no roof and no walls and no floors and nothing when I started. And I realized, as 10 years before I did TBA, I did a conservation foundation, and I was focused very much on conservation, and I kind of distanced myself from it. I didn't know why. And I met an incredible professor of Columbia University who said it's not about conservation, preservation, it's about revitalization. So we're talking about reefs over the next few days and how the seas can regenerate themselves, and nature has a way of regenerating itself. But our heritage and our value systems tend to need a little bit more help to revitalize themselves. And I suppose the dialogues that we establish here are a very important part of revitalizing the monastery and giving it a sense of purpose, but also revitalizing the foundation as we now venture into art and science. So art and science is a very uncomfortable area, far more uncomfortable, I think, than art and architecture, who've coexisted, maybe unhappily sometimes. But art and science have been many attempts to put these two things together, and they have failed miserably. And I know that Tony has a few things he'd like to contribute about this, so I won't go too far into it, but a lot of what I'm trying to do here is to collide ideas, like a little bit the big hydrogen collider in CERN, that I feel that particles of knowledge, as expert as all of you are in your respective fields, I'm always interested in the collision of these ideas. And I suppose the last 10 years have been about experimenting with colliding different disciplines, and the idea of transdisciplinary work comes from working from the creative moment onwards, not throwing people together in a kind of vacant space, but trying to capture that moment where life begins, that art Higgs boson moment. Thank you.
I don't want to use the mic. Well, I knew that Francesca would do that, brilliantly speak offhand, without preparation. Yes. Well, there are some notes, I know. But sort of bring it all together, and then I would be here like, oh God, what do I do? So that's why we do the Alpha and Omega. She is, as you all know, the very quick rapid fire. And I take...
Unfortunately, something.
Well, and I take a lot of time to sort of digest and think and realize and so on very often. So we have this kind of really funny game at times about these things. So that's why, since she spoke, I will read. I knew I would be way too nervous to kind of... And then so last night after Amar gave us, I will not consequently read, but I will partially read. So after Amar's really incredible talk, and under the impact of last night, so I went back to the hotel. I thought, okay, I'm just going to put some notes together in order to not let it happen, to just kind of seem like completely unable to articulate my thoughts. But what I wanted to talk about, there are two things really, but one is why Lockwood, right? And I think, yeah, it has a very, very specific history. because we are here, and you graciously agreed to be part of this experiment for quite some years now, and in fact it was Olaf Nicolai's first invitation to gather here in Lockwood in 2005 to watch the falling stars of Thyssen-Bornemisza that brought us here in August of 2005. That was sort of the first initial gathering, and you know, the falling stars are obviously the most ephemeric appearance in the skies, something that passes by and leaves us with hopes and leaves us with great memory of certain moments. And in a way, that event was called Nightfall. So in a way, Nightfall happened, and it happened, as I said, due to an invitation which we didn't even know that we extended in some ways. And it has somehow become the starting point for something which is like a clearinghouse of what we do, of what TBA21 does, of what Francesca and I do. And it has taken a couple of reinvention and relaunches, as Brett Kellhammer has taught me is the term to use in New York. It's a relaunch. Various kind of reiterations of our Lockwood meetings until we even started to understand why and what is happening exactly in this sort of, I called it last night the secluded gathering for like-minded, the unconventionalist and temporary population of Lockwood, of artsy people flocking in from all over the globe. Now, so what do? We watch shooting stars here maybe, but perhaps even back in 2005, the first time we came here, we actually allowed ourselves, I think, to indulge, and it's a real indulgement in a sense of community and communality and collectivity. So Amar spoke of friendship last night, as a kind of guiding idea, and I think we've been speaking a lot in the Foundation of hospitality lately, partially because we opened a new space in Vienna, which kind of shifted the emphasis of what the Foundation does. Great deal, I have to say. And hospitality, in a way, is not just to make people feel at home, but to also create a sense of belonging, a sense of ownership, of pride, of entitlement, of the ability to sort of speak to one another, to share and disagree, room for failure, room for experiment. Yes, all these things sound so familiar, but when it is an institution that does that, that's again something else. Institutions normally are not super sensitive, and this is the point that I will make sort of in the second part of my speech, but super sensitivity, which is something that makes you very vulnerable to the outside, which kind of creates a permeance between the inner core that you seem to want to protect and sort of the openness towards society, towards life, change, and whatever. But to keep that sort of membrane, that hospitality, to allow for this sort of dialogue within an institutional setting, within an art foundation, within what TBA21 is doing here, and possibly at Augarten, is quite a risky proposition, and I really, I think that's part of my great admiration for Francesca. I really have so much respect for her allowing that to happen, for her very naturally being the person that constantly pushes the envelope in the sense of, let's not close the doors, let's not say what we'll do tomorrow, let's kind of keep reacting to the things that come at us. And obviously these sort of processes of reaction sometimes overwhelm everyone within the foundation, and you just kind of started setting your mind onto something, when suddenly another shooting star comes by with new hopes and new visions and so on. So this is a little bit sort of the why we're here, what we're trying to do, and I thought I just kind of speak a little bit about these two images that you have also been probably seeing in the folders of today's, of this year's Lockwood Academy statements and invitations, because it's actually not until this year, interestingly enough, and you know, as I said, it's the 5th incarnation of our Lockwood meeting, that a former Lockwoodite, you know, a former participant in one of these Lockwood conferences, the fantastic curator Bit Habernick, has actually sent us these images and pointed out that you know, Lockwood maybe has something to do with Laputa. And I don't know if some of you remember Laputa, but Laputa is this fantastic island that, you know, it's kind of this fictional place, this fictional island that features in Gulliver's Travels. And it's a flying island, about 4.5 miles in diameter, with an adamantine base, which its inhabitants can maneuver in any directions using magnetic levitation. Further, Wikipedia reads, Laputa's population consists mainly of educated people who are fond of mathematics, astronomy, music, and technology, but fail to make practical use of their knowledge. And I'm now editing some of the very unpleasant parts of this tale out, because the role of women and stuff like that, that's maybe not for us today. So the Laputans, I read further, have mastered magnetic levitation, discovered the 2 moons of Mars, which in reality would not be discovered for another 150 years. However, they are unable to construct well-designed clothing or buildings because they take measurements with instruments such as quadrants and a compass, rather than with tape measures. So what of course is really intriguing about the tale of Laputa is the incommensurability of skills and intelligence and practical applicability. Right? So having the most sophisticated instruments at times is sort of a misleading tactic in kind of mapping and filling out what is around you. So sometimes, you know, it is intuition, sensitivity, supersensitivity, these things that could possibly be the tools to operate and to navigate in different times. So that's why also Laputa, maybe, it's just a parenthesis, you know, it comes also from La Puta, the Spanish word for the whore. So Lockwood's Castle in the Sky, to refer to Miyazaki's really famous, very first Studio Ghibli, and that's the other image, which I hope you have all seen. I think it's, yeah, that's the Miyazaki Castle in the Sky. It is actually a reworking of this Laputa story. It's Miyazaki who you know, rediscovered it 150 years later. And what, you know, again, I found so intriguing about remembering that film, which obviously I have watched with my children, because I would probably otherwise, you know, watch Amar Kanbar, The Scene of Crime, rather than, you know, Tales of Gulliver's Travels, is that Miyazaki actually refers to 2 sources of inspiration. One was Laputa, but the other one are the Welsh miners' strikes. So this whole kind of, you know, strike, or how can I say, the whole, struggle, here we go, the whole struggle against oppression that is a part, or that is at the foundation of that film, you know, is maybe the second directive, the second trajectory, in a way, to remember when putting these 2 kind of images, these 2 narratives together of Laputa and Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky, and you know how that then kind of relates to Lockwood. So in a way, the self-indulging community of disoriented, educated people, as Gulliver's Tales suggests, doesn't come without the demand, in a way, of engaging in some sort of a sensible activity or in a quest for meaning and engagement. And you know, that's in a way also how I see us here in a way. Yeah? It might be a sort of an indulging in the sense of hospitality and communality, and you know, this sort of déviant milieu to be doing that. But it's also you know, participating in an attempt to forge this sense of productivity and friendship and goodwill that actually is the basis for the ability to create and to change and to bring things into action. And I do strongly believe, you know, that this is where basically all begins. So, as I said, the kind of initial impetus before kind of adding this kind of very lengthy and maybe explanatory introduction was this idea of supersensitivity. And Francesca asked me to sort of think about, you know, how do I operate as a curator? You know, where do I get my information, or how do I decide about certain things, and you know, whether I would be able to share this kind of process with you. And so this was, you know, this was kind of my first or the word that somehow seemed to summarize best how I felt sometimes, you know, in my now 20 years or 25 years of work as a curator. And, you know, in a way, when we speak of supersensitivity, that is not just something that kind of resonates positively. You know, people that are supersensitive, they have a weakness. You know, they have something that is even pathological in a certain sense. You know, that is something that is hurtful, that creates this condition of, you know, sometimes, you know, overreaction to outside impetus. You know, it creates tremors. It, you know, the sensual qualities of that person take over sort of the rational and clear sort of démarche of a sort of a person that is more oriented with, you know, I guess, the skills of rationality. So I would say it's this double image. It's this image of someone who is, yeah, nervous and he's alert and who has that kind of failure, yeah, in one hand. But then again, I was also thinking, well, what is really the basis of the word aesthetics? And I looked up Terry Eagleton's book, and I remember that he quoted there, you know, aesthetic was born as a discourse of the body. Yeah? And aesthetic, you know, being a very slippery term and with a very complicated history, really comes from the Greek, you know, which means the being percepted by feeling. And just later with Kant and with the Kantian process of enlightenment, you know, did aesthetic actually become the science of the rational, you know, which actually means this kind of, how can I say, the distance, the disinterested, the contemplative, you know, that what we perhaps spoke about yesterday of art being disassociated from sort of the world of in which we live. But the origin, the very origin, the aesthetikos, is this ability to feel with the senses. And I think that's just something I wanted to bring up and have us remembered. And this now becomes a little bit complicated, but maybe you would allow me to finish with this note, because this is an author and a thinker that we have been working with quite a bit, Jalal Tufik. We, through Walid Rad, who's an artist friend and somebody who should be here today, but he's a documenter as well. Because Jalal Tufik has, amongst many other things, written this actually wonderful book called Oversensitivity. And it's really, the first question is, you know, why this book is even called Oversensitivity. It's not clear. It's a mixture of essays, most of them extremely political at the end. But there is a clue, and there's a clue in footnote number 23. You know? And so for all of you who haven't read Tufik, Tufik is very sensitive to footnotes. So footnote 23 is the key to understanding why, actually, he does speak of that. And in footnote 23, he brings up something that he will then continue to work on many other publications as well. But he speaks of untimely collaboration and intuition. He writes, "Writers do not readers, publishers do. They need strangers for their writing to occur at all, and writers and artists to inflect it through untimely collaboration, to be their enlarged intuition. How, from this perspective," continues Tufik, "do we know that there is a future? We know that from our feeling that we still receive, from the continuing relevance of intuition in our work. Intuition is largely a sensibility to the future creation of others." So, what Tufik perhaps describes here is this condition of oversensitivity of artists who, through the sharpened intuition and the untimely collaboration that they have established with artists of the past and the future, are connected to such a time of the past and the future. And that it requires a strong sort of sensitivity to intuit such future. So these are really the notes that I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for being here. I also have, I will see how it goes in the course of this morning, and maybe Francesca and I will continue this duo. But there's also a few artists. Duo.
Just checking.
There are also some artists that have sent in very short statements who could not be here, and there are in this package that you have received. But maybe we'll read one or the other when time comes and when we feel that this is the right moment to do so, because some of them are actually very surprising and very touching.
I think we should read them. Thank you. Well, there was something that Amar said I thought that was really also, he talked about taking risks in the beginning, and then in the end he talked about hope. And I know that through his work he's given tremendous hope to the communities that he has interacted with. Not only has he obviously taken extraordinary lengths of time to do his research, similarly Walid Rad, and there are Jalik as well, and we've been working with a number of artists that are very, very specific and very committed to their research and how they bring it together. Zyman and Stalin overwhelmed us slightly with it yesterday night at 1 o'clock in the morning. I thought it was fair. But I think this idea of hope and working with artists that give that extra is something that you've really brought into the foundation, because being able to I mean, Walid is an artist who wouldn't normally sort of enter a collection in a sort of traditional way with his work. It's quite a difficult process with him. I mean, your relationship with the artist is very important to the foundation, I would say. Also, like with, for instance, with Olaf and all the work that he's been creating over the years, which has a tremendous diversity as well. Maybe you can just say a few words about that. I think it's a very important part of our work.
Yeah, I think this is the real hope that we had when we started out on this trajectory. I think is that the foundation would be a foundation not just of contemporary art, but for contemporary artists. This is, I think, why we ventured into producing, into participating in the production of new work, in the work that happens today, that will happen tomorrow. Rather than sort of retroactively think, well, which work was the best work by Walid Rad, since he's not here. Let's buy the masterpiece. It does require a completely different trust and a completely different mindset to say the work that will be produced tomorrow, the work that is in the pipeline somewhere, is actually the work that we want to engage with. The new CD is definitely better than the old one. Has to be, because that's where, and that feeling and that trust can only be established in a certain process of duality again, you know, which doesn't mean that it's about saying, well, you know, it can be a little more red or a little bit more blue, and it's not about it qualitatively informing, which will sometimes happen as well, but it's I would say we, of course, stay out of the process of production, right? I mean, we are producing in the sense of supporting and embracing, and not in the sense of creating a product. I mean, if at all, it is about de-commodifying and not re-commodifying. I mean, obviously being aware that the processes of commodification are circling around the foundation, and we are part of that, and it's not, in no ways can we exclude ourselves. But regardless of that, it is because of that friendship, hospitality, interaction, ongoing exchange, that a foundation can be where it is and has many, many blind spots. Right? There are many, many areas which we do not cover, many artists that are not part of, you know, what we do. So it's individual, it's, you know, very sort of subjective in a way. It's driven by a process that kind of happens intuitively between Francesca and me, very often not even extremely, again, rationally laid out as a plan. And yet things come, you know, they come because they have to somehow. You know? It's maybe what Jalal calls, you know, this kind of having the information being transmitted to you from the future. You know? It's kind of this very complicated way of putting it, but if you just let that idea happen, you know, for a moment, if you allow yourself to believe in that, there is, and it's not just a random noise, right? As what he used to say, it's not a random noise that is transmitted to you, but there is, in fact, something that I think, you know, does come to you.
Well, I like random, as you know. I love random. Maybe I should say just a few words about the Academy, because there are people sitting right in front of me that were basically invited by the Academy, and the Academy is a little bit this new beast that has started to develop within the foundation, because I thought very much about how to generate new ideas and new work in a new process, as well as taking the presentation and the dissemination, if you want, of these ideas out of a rather more traditional form of exhibition making. So one of the most developed part of TBA has been, of course, our exhibitions program, which is only made, which makes complete sense. If you're commissioning new work, you present it, and we've struggled with space. We finally, eventually found a great new space in Vienna, which was an artist studio, which has given us the idea to focus on one or two artists at a time. Our present show, Zyman Starling, together with Superflex, who are here today, or one of them is. But you know, this is a new direction of presenting our work and our commitment to various artists as well, that have been formed an important part of the collection over the years, and giving us a chance to investigate and go deeper into those contributions. The Academy, as I started it off, has basically been a bit of a failure, I have to say. We sat here and presented to you the Daniela last year, we were going to conquer the American continent with a big boat and do a whole bunch of scientific experiments and acoustic projects, and invite artists and scientists alike onto this boat. And we were actually going to make a point about the melting caps and circumnavigation of things, and how you know, the North Pole is basically melting away to the point where you can actually now cross the North Passage. Somebody did that this summer, so that took a little bit of the excitement out of that idea. And also I ran into a lot of technical problems and a lot of issues with crew and staff, and things that I wanted to start up I couldn't follow up properly. And I just wanted to say that actually the failure, like you said, you know, we don't have, like in science, a controlled environment where you can make experiments and you test out things and you have this controlled space and you can say, well, that worked, that didn't work, that worked. I mean, we're in such a huge open space where I navigate and sort of go diving off in this direction or the other, looking for some new stimuli. Equally, I can fail, I can make mistakes, and I think this is also one of the great gifts I have. My gift back from the foundation is the tolerance of sometimes my mistakes, and that I can be misguided or misguide myself. However, I have tremendous hope for this academy because I think it brings together a challenge not only of new ideas that can stimulate us and help us to look and think outside of the box and continue to push that proverbial envelope, but also in the presentation and the dissemination, because I think outside of exhibitions, as brilliant as they are and important as they are, I think there are also possible other ways of sharing that information, whether it be through the internet or whether it be through creating a new way of sharing and putting our ideas and information together with some iPhones that I'm going to distribute later on to everybody and ask you to contribute little, like a Instagram bloggy type thing that can go onto our, yes, you have one. These are the sort of experiments I like to invest in because sometimes my attention span is very short and I like to have things in very small bite-sized pieces and put things together, and I realize when I put all these ideas onto paper, like I did the page that is in there that I wrote, there's a collection of ideas that came into my head over the last 15 years maybe. So, you know, there is that processing that I like, and sometimes it feels like this collision of ideas that can be forced together, but through some synchronistic or catalyzing energy that I have. And sometimes I think that some people sitting around the tables in front of me, they're so focused in what they do and their excellence and their expertise, they don't, you know, we don't have that ability to share and communicate outside a realm of comfort. And as we get older, that realm of comfort, that area of comfort, gets narrower, actually. And I was sort of part of me trying to stay young forever, but, you know, being able to keep that mind of mine very stretchy and very elastic over these different disciplines. And encouraging transdisciplinary and seeing the failures of others, and by the way, my own, and being very aware of them, I feel, rather than being critical, I'm trying to encourage experiments that may trigger off new ideas by bringing things together. And this is also partly why people from different work, you know, different from the political sphere, from the biodiversity or environmental disciplines, have been invited here, and I'm particularly grateful for them to come here and share with us their ideas within this context, because it is an unusual way of asking people to express themselves. So anything anybody would like to throw at us right now, I think is the right moment to sort of, as everybody's voice is valuable here for us. But if you don't have anything, Bruce, come on, you're one of our moderators. You came up with this topic here, super sensitivity.
No, he didn't.
I've never been accused of super sensitivity.
Yeah.
Is it Mark?
Yeah, there's a microphone.
No, I probably don't need a microphone. I was just thinking about what he said last night, and he was talking about, you know, if you have enough information, even if it's contradictory information or it's information that isn't sort of normal mutual knowledge, that comprehension then leads to better decisions and leads to better understanding and leads to better you know, better decision making. And I was thinking about that and watching him smoke, and I was thinking, you know, comprehension doesn't necessarily produce anything. I mean, we have this huge amount of information from science about smoking and lung cancer and jaw cancer, et cetera, and you have huge amounts of imagery, iconography against that as well. So the idea that simply knowledge, information, and iconography that is right somehow then produces the right decision seems to me to be a failed concept. And I wish he were here, because I don't like to be critical of someone who isn't present, but I just thought, watching him smoke, I thought, come on, you know everything, but you're still going to smoke. So that's not, there is a contradiction right at the dead center of this idea of best decision making. And I think the way you explained how you're doing the foundation was very satisfying in a way, because you're also talking about failures and misrepresentations and misdirections and so on. And that strikes me as the right thing to do. And I just want to make that note anyhow, about rational decision making.
Can I ask you, because you've just flown in from Cairo, and I know you're going to speak later on today, but from an institutional point of view, when you're the dean of an American university in Cairo, I mean, how are the institutions in that part of the world coping, for instance? Because we, from the outside, and we are, of course, even with Ammar, he even says, whether he spent 20 years researching these topics,
right,
he will still say, I'm on the outside. We are always, all of us, somehow on the outside. Maybe not these two, they come straight from Ramallah, but I'm just thinking, how does this manifest itself differently in Cairo?
It's a complicated question, but I think we're always on the outside and the inside, no matter where we are.
Microphone,
Sorry.
I think it's working.
It's up.
Sorry. And, I mean, my sense is that you're always on the inside and the outside wherever you are. There's no sort of place of authenticity that can be described in a convincing way, anywhere any longer in the kind of cultures that we live in. They're too integrated and too overlapping, so there isn't, a kind of deep authenticity of a specific culture or a specific place anyhow. But, being in Egypt and in the Middle East in general is to be on a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster that one feels like Renaud Latour, that it's not progress, but that it can be progressive. That is to say, there can be moments of moving forward, and I think that's what's happening. But there's no, great epiphanies that are happening where all of a sudden everything is changing. In fact, it goes forward and back and forward and back, and that's what's happening. So institutions, I think, are, if they're stable institutions, they're able to somehow steer some of that in right directions, but ultimately nobody knows the future, and nobody ever has, and it's it's chaotic, and it's very, very difficult to predict. And we open the university on Tahrir Square about 3 days of every week, and then the other 4 days it's closed because there's some kind of protest or violence or something on the street. So you just move with contingencies over and over and over again and negotiate those contingencies. So but there's a larger sense that there is movement, and then there's movement forward, and then there's movement back, and it's like a dance, and it's a dance where people step on each other's feet a lot.